you for being here with me. I'm Angela Denker, and I'm so excited to talk with Liz Bucar today. Okay, Liz, you got to tell me first too. Did
Yeah.
I say your last name right?
Oh, yeah. What did you say?
I said Liz Bucar, like
That's totally
emphasize.
fine. I say like Bucar, like a blue car, but
Okay,
I have a very like fancy aunt who was on the stage and she went by Bouchard, but no one else in my family does anything. I know Bouchard, but just Bucar, and I'm not picky about it. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like the fancy. That's
I
kind
know,
of
I know.
cool,
We know each other, but we know each other in real life, so we've never said each other's names out loud to each other. So this is kind of
right?
like,
Right, I was just thinking that as I said it, and
yeah,
so, anyway, but this
no problem.
is really wonderful to be here, and it's gonna be such a great discussion because I have been really interested in the intersection between the wellness space and religion and spirituality, and now we have this MAHA movement, which is making a lot of
Hmm.
news, and we have this pipeline from sort of mom influencer to health and wellness to right wing. I mean, there's just so much to talk
Yeah,
about today.
yeah.
Um, but I know that there's folks here from both of our communities, and Liz has a new book out. You better hold it up because I have the digital version.
I know you have the,
Yay!
so there we go. There it is. Beyond wellness.
Uh,
But
so
also, I'm excited to talk to you because we're both in this space of like what I call reimagining religion, right? Like trying to think about what to do with religion, politically engaged religion, like in this particular time period. So this is just kind of a piece of that conversation where we have some overlap. So it's fun.
definitely, and
Yeah.
it's you're an academic. I am not an academic. I just have a master's in divinity, which gives me the ability to be a Lutheran pastor.
Mhm.
But I think one thing that we both share is like this cynicism and suspicion sometimes
Yeah.
about the dangers of organized religion.
Yeah.
And at the same time, this longing for meaning, this longing
Yeah.
for connection to the divine. So while we have different religious commitments or different connections to religion, especially with me being an ordained pastor,
Yeah.
I do think and I think we both have a sense that like the world in general, people in general have a hunger for
Yes.
meaning and
Yes.
purpose,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot out there that's genuinely
Yeah.
offering that
And
in
people are
political
hungry and we're
spaces.
kind of are, I think people are primed right now to like, give me anything. Like, what do you got? You
Yes.
got religion? I'll take a little religion. Like, what do you have for religion? Maybe it'll work for me because I'll take anything right now. No, I think that's great. Like, that's a great way of talking about where our intersection is. I talk about that as like skeptic seeker in my like sort of public facing work, but it's the religious studies scholar of me, which is very like, trained as a cultural critic, right? I deconstruct,
Mhm.
and I can't turn that off, and that's how I approach religion a lot. But then there's also this part of me which is like, there's some really good stuff here that's really helping me as a non-religiously affiliated person, and there's a real hunger, I think, for some of this framework, interpretive framework, but also like moral guidance or something. Is kind of how I'm thinking about. I'm writing a piece right now about comedians as like
Oh,
prophets and moral guides
yeah.
and stuff for Colbert's like last. And so
Yeah.
we can't like looking for like this. Look, we're looking for help anywhere we can get it. And I find religion very interesting conversation partner. So
Well, that's funny. I'm looking forward to reading that piece, and,
yeah.
it makes me think about my mother. So my mom was a pastor's kid growing up, and she's always done her devotions and,
Mhm.
very connected to church. But lately, she's been really into Jimmy Kimmel and
Oh,
to
interesting.
Colbert as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that looking for meaning and truth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that's so fun about Liz's book and her work is that it's very experiential. So you have this academic side and you can really get into those weeds of, the science of it and deconstructing it. But then you also go and you try
Yeah.
some of these practices. And I love that piece of it, because that's something I try to do in my work as well, which is like put myself out there. Don't be someone who's sort of gazing from far away, but
Yeah.
really getting into it personally.
Yeah, that was really fun about the research for this book. Someone said you did a lot of unhinged things for this book, which is true. If you make it all the way through the book, you kind of hear like, oh, okay, that kind of increasingly becomes more unhinged. But I think that's a good way of putting it too, right? I do some of the historical work and I do some of the religious studies work, and I always give you like a little bit of religious studies framework because I find that so interesting for understanding what's going on. But then like I did the things too, because I was like, look, if I really want to take it take this idea seriously, that some of this stuff in a more religious container works better, then I should try it out in a more religious container. And that's a little uncomfortable, and parts of it really become personal and very vulnerable. But that's all. That's how I do my teaching too, right? I'm a pedagogical character in my classes too, and I think it makes it easier for students to connect with students, but then also like readers in any sort of. Yeah, if I show you my journey, this isn't your journey, but here's a journey
Yeah.
as a way to start the conversation and invite you into it.
Well, and I think I can relate really as a journalist because in
Yes.
journalism,
Yeah.
there's such this skepticism, especially around religion, and there's a hesitancy to engage with religion. And I think that's probably true for some folks in academia as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your work. I think it's so relevant to this current moment. And also, like I said, fun. So let's get into it. I love getting the opportunity to be an interviewer again. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but
All
feel
right.
free to
Put
shoot
on your
back at me.
journalist hat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Folks here, I'll try to sort of wrap up the portion with just Liz and I with a few minutes left to engage some of your questions. So if you all have questions, there's a place you can put them in the chat. You can put them in there anytime, but we're probably not going to address them until the end unless we happen to see it and just kind of have a quick answer to it.
Yeah.
But so please, if you have questions, thoughts you'd like us to bring up, you can put those in the chat. Okay. So let's talk about Beyond Wellness and kind
Okay.
of the story behind how this book came to be. Because as we've said, I imagine you started writing this proposal before we knew we'd have RFK as HHS director
Yeah.
and, the MAHA movement having such a massive impact on American public policy. So tell me about how it came to be, why you originally wanted to write it, and how your understanding of it has shifted now as you're releasing it in this moment.
Yeah. So I think that like the only thing that was on my radar in terms of like the Maha stuff at the time when I was proposing the book and writing it was sort of the vaccine hesitancy stuff. But I did not imagine, it was not on my bingo card that that we would have dismantle public health, that we would like totally shift what we consider to be um, the role of the CDC or or just healthcare in the U.S. in general. I didn't expect this particular Secretary of Health for sure, and it has meant I have lots to lots to say now that I finished the book. But the book was more. I mean, it was. I always finish a book with like the idea for the next book. And so my last book was about like religious. I'm always like, if I could only write another, 70,000 words. And the last book was about religious appropriation. So it was a book about thinking about how folks borrow religion. Like we talk about cultural appropriation as a bad thing, but we do a lot of religious borrowing and don't always think about the harms and the um, things that we do that like sort of I don't know, rely on and hold up systems of injustice that maybe we don't even but our borrowing sort of reinforces those. And one of the chapters, so it was a chapter about like politics and a chapter about education and a chapter about health, a chapter about basically yoga. And I was like, I got way more I want to think about this health and wellness thing, because I do see that in my students and my cohort, my friend cohort, which is very quote unquote secular, that religion has kind of been replaced by this quest for wellness. And I just think the wellness industry has sold us really like not done us dirty, basically, right? Like I typically feel like that as a midlife woman, like I was just told all this stuff, which turns out not to actually even be good for my health and well-being, but also had me focus on just a very small slice of what human flourishing would look like. And maybe that because of my age, I'm like, I just want more than that. And I find that religion is a really interesting way to think about what that is. I want more than, so I'm wearing like a wearable, I wear a Whoop, right? I want more than something that's telling me like that I hit my like activity for the day, or that my sleep was good, or that my blood work is fine, or my muscle mass, or I don't have, osteoporosis. All those things are great, but that's like not enough. I want the fullest, most human life I could have. And the wellness industry has just talked to me about beauty and longevity and optimization and me. And I think anything that's probably clear to everybody since COVID, there's no like being well when everything around you is burning down. And I think I mean, I know you're very politically active, so and I know where you're located too, right? So in terms of the Twin Cities, so like that's even more so true now, right? Like with what's happening politically, what's happening technologically, what's happening ecologically, like I need more resources for understanding what's going on and trying to figure out, what I want to, how I want to be in the world with others, for others in a more robust way than just like worrying about my own biomarkers, which are
Right.
fine, but like that's there's got to be more than that, right? Like, okay,
Right.
great. My BMI is finally at the right level. Woo, yippee me, right? But like, am I happy? Like, am I flourishing? Am I prepared for the death of a parent? Am I ready for like my kid leaving the house? Am I like thinking how I want to show up for a community? What communities I want to be part of? Like, no, those have not been answered by the wellness industry. So it was sort of an entry level point into this bigger conversation. And then I think it also came out of like frustration of like people being like, "Oh, I don't like religion," and then they were doing all this stuff, and I was like, "That all looks like religion to me." I mean, I don't know where you think manifestation came from or what you think the origins of like aesthetic practices, like, food restrictions, like where you think that comes from. That looks like religion to me. So
Mm.
are you really not doing religion, or you just don't know that you're doing religion? So here's an opportunity for me to be like, yeah, I guess this stuff is religion. And it might work better for you if you could embrace that. Or maybe you don't want to do it because it has some values associated with it that you don't like. So it was sort of just a great like teaching moment for me, but then also this personal like frustration of like where I like was in my life and like what I wanted to think about and push on going forward.
Well, as someone who has just written a book on masculinity and on,
Yes.
this sort of right wing, when you're talking about maxing and all these numbers and metrics, that's so much a part of what's being pushed towards young men and boys. And I
Yeah.
see that, even with my own teen and preteen of what is getting driven towards them.
Hmm.
And so I want to talk just for a minute about gender because I was thinking
Hmm.
when you were talking about writing this book, we're in this interesting cultural moment for women when it comes to appearance because on one hand we have so many shrinking celebrities, we have the age of
Yeah.
Ozempic, and on the other hand we have this increasing awareness around and openness to talking about perimenopause, about
Yeah.
menopause,
Yeah.
about that women later in life, especially, I'm thinking back to JD Vance talking about how his wife's mother was primarily valuable to them as a child caregiver.
Yes.
And that, this very narrow view of what women have to offer and what their lives look like after childbearing ages.
Yeah. Dr.
So
Oz just had a quote about women being under child or something. There was some word he like
right.
made up this week, right? Like how
Yes.
we didn't have us have enough children that were, yeah, we're not flourishing because we don't have whatever he thinks that we should be having.
I mean, yes, such a wild cultural moment. And what is giving me hope in the midst of it is, I'm thinking of Rebecca Solnit. I'm thinking of you. And do you think that you writing this book at this point in your life, when I hear you saying, I wanted more, do you hope to sort of capture some of that cultural moment as well for like, hey, women, we can still want more? And there's this invitation,
Yeah.
when it comes to women readers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, or someone like a Shannon Watts. I think that there is, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
planning on that. That just is what age of my life I'm in, right? I mean, for a while I was just referring to myself as in my zero fucks era, and I said I shouldn't keep talking about that on social media when I was trying to like be like a polite person who sold books. But I think it just happens to be like what happens midlife with women in general. So it just is a moment where I feel like I can be bold and want more. But I mean, back to what you were saying about, I mean, the physicality in me is such a great metaphor because I actually thought a couple of years ago we started talking more about strength training and bone density and women trying to become, less breakable and,
Yeah.
all that advice about cardio and shrinking and thinness. I thought that was all kind of going away and it, comes swooping back. And then
Yeah.
with the GLP-1s, which I know are like amazing miracle drugs for a lot of people, but also are a place that's something that people can abuse, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And then I was interested in talking to the author of Fit Nation, a friend of mine, Natalia. Pretzella about this, and she was like, "I think these GLP-1s mean that the gym won't be for weight loss, and we're going to get back into thinking about, carving out these strong bodies." And I said, "I think that's gendered." So I still think there'll be all this pressure from women to shrink and shrink and shrink, and then there's just some people who are willing to take up a lot of space. So I am probably always someone in my life who's taken up a lot of space, both like physically and like in my personality. And right now, I'm finding others who are interested in that. I mean, I'm not just writing for women, but I do think that part
No.
of the what I've been sold by wellness partly has been gendered. And I think, like, sort of what you were talking about too, men are served up something just as like toxic and harmful. It's just slightly different, right? This idea of like optimizing everything and uber productivity and the look maxing stuff, which I also didn't see coming. That's pretty extreme. And but this has, there's always this idea that like men had to have a Dorito body and women had to be like, skinny size zero. And it's just becoming, I think, more extreme as we have these different kind of tools to modify ourselves. Yeah. So, and I think all that in the world of AI makes me kind of, or the growth or whatever AI wants me to push back and think about what is it, what does it really mean to be human?
Yeah.
Like it's not about mortality and longevity. AI can do all that way better than us. It's not about perfect logical thinking. AI can do that better than us. What can we do? What's the messiness of us? What's our embodied, relational, emotional, suffering, joyful, whatever it is? Like, what does that look like that AI can't replicate? And that's the stuff that I'm kind of like having fun thinking about with other people and lean into. And then beyond wellness is an exploration of that through different practices. Like, what would it mean, if we take eating, which we've been kind of talking about, all this pushing back against, I mean, so first of all, tracing like some of the ways in which religious logic gets just totally naturalized. Like we don't even realize that when we talk about some foods as being good and other foods as being bad, that's a moral judgment that looks very much like religion to me, right? It looks like a purity, pollution sort of categorization. There's no reason why like kale is good, and I don't know what's good right now. Sorry, red meat is good. I don't even know what's good right now, right? What's on the food pyramid, right?
Protein.
Tallow, yeah, protein, just protein, all the protein, cottage cheese, good, right?
Right.
But like all that feels like hidden religious logic that we've just sort of internalized and naturalized and go mainstream. And I like, want to like uncover that, be like, just so you know, like the idea of raw milk is being good for you has all this sort of baggage. But then also like, so Brian Johnson's a good example. So he's one of these
Yep.
biohacking. He had best biomarkers of anyone, he says. Spends $2 million a year getting his biomarkers perfect. He doesn't eat past 11 o'clock every day. He doesn't eat a lot of communal meals because he eats a very sort of like restricted diet. So what would eating well look like that's not that? So how would it, and what can religions tell us about that? Or what would fasting look like that's not for shrinking in size, but as a ritualized form of fasting, right? Which you have lots of examples in religion for. So really thinking about religious practices of food ways, eating, producing, um, having communal meals together, using food, all these different ways as really expanding our relationship to food and having a bigger, more robust, spot for. I don't want to stop eating at 11 o'clock. I would not give up five. I don't want 5 more years to just not eat the rest of the day. That's how I feel about cold baths too. Right? I don't want a cold plunge either. There's certain things I don't want to do for a longer life. And like food
Yes.
and not having communal meals is one of them. So that's the kind of, yeah, that's the kind of stuff I'm
Well,
going to do in the book.
and I agree. Like, I'm so uninterested in a life where I live to 100 years if that life, like, doesn't include, donuts and, like, really good coffee and,
Yeah.
all the joy and connection that comes and the uniqueness. I think one of the sadnesses that you capture in your work is this homogenization of religious practices where they all become about optimization, they all become about
The
wealth
individual
accumulation.
too. Yeah.
Yes, and
It's like
they're
a prosperity
strict.
gospel for the body, right? It's like, yeah.
True, true,
Yeah.
and, the power of positive thinking,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things that lose their cultural uniqueness and lose the history and the backstory that makes them meaningful, which I think your background as a religious studies scholar helps you to understand and reclaim without some of the baggage of, you know, if you were, say, a practitioner or a clergy member in any of these religions. So I think that that's important in the work. I'm curious.
Mm.
So when you were doing some of these different experiences in the book, is there this is probably a hard question, but, when you're thinking about, the emptiness of so many of these wellness practices when you get to the end of it and the hollowness
Yeah.
of the salvation that they're offering, what's the counterweight to that? Like, where did you experience nirvana, or where did you experience some sense of this intense meaning? And I'm sure it was a lot of places, but are there a couple different things you'd wanna share there?
Yeah, and I guess for me, like, words like enlightenment and nirvana are probably too no, they're, like, too big. I don't think I've, like, reached
Yeah.
any of those things, right? But I think that there are these light bulb moments for
Yeah.
me or insights or things that I, like, carried out of the experience that I was like and it happens in every chapter. I mean, you kind of to see the story unfold in their stories, right? It's better to see it in the chapter, but, I mean, something like let's take, a sound bath chapter as an example. So
Yeah.
sound baths are really popular now. People love them as a form of meditation. I was explained, sound baths were explained to me as like meditation, like taking the elevator, right? Because it's just like fast track to like meditating because you don't have to train that much. You just lay on the
Hmm.
floor and it's kind of passive. And so that's how I went into my sound baths. So then I did this whole gong crawl thing in New York City with a guide, like did like a lot of sound baths in 36 hours, which not recommended to do that many in 36 hours. But what I actually figured out from that experience was like I was really unprepared to like use my listening as a form of like spiritual practice or religious practice. I'm like a really bad listener. And that's not just me. Like I'm wearing headphones. I'm wearing these now because it's better sound, but like I wear noise canceling headphones when I walk the dog. I sleep in earplugs. I
Mhm.
I get distracted if they're working on the roof of the house next to me. I try to tune the noise out, right? I'm not a deep listener. And so I realized that partly what I went looking for in the more religious containers was thinking about how do religious communities think about listening. So not
Mhm.
just like other senses or not just rationality, but how do like taste, touch, but also hearing. How can training yourself to be a good listener contribute to your human flourishing? So the sort of dive I did into Sikh kirtan was really fun for that, thinking about how kirtan is used within the Sikh community to form traditions and connection to the community and belonging, but also as a form of like moral training and emotional intelligence. That there's a way in which you're taught to listen for these different emotions and not just the good emotions. I think one really interesting takeaway from that chapter is I get really frustrated by this like good vibes, only the good vibes, sort of like um, chasing just the happiness and contentment. To me, that actually feels like a very I don't know, thin version of human existence, and that in the Sikh kirtan tradition, you're taught to feel all the emotions from the music, the good and the bad, and to lean into them and understand them, interpret them, and that you do that with the music. You can also do that in relationships, and being that kind of listener makes you better able to respond. And so, the way it kind of trickles out into your life is like that's kind of like a takeaway sort of insight for me that like I don't think about deep listening and cultivating that. I'm thinking about yoga asana and getting strong and like looking good in
Mhm.
yoga pants, but I'm not thinking about training my hearing and my listening and what that means. Um, what that can mean, again, outside of myself. A lot of this is about community and ethics for me anyway. That's a lot of my
Mhm.
takeaways. So that was one chapter that I really was like, okay, I'm gonna have to work on that one for sure. Yeah.
Well, the guys that I study a lot are very concerned about women looking too good in yoga pants. It's one of like the cardinal sins.
Yeah.
So, it's good that you're focusing on lots of things. Um, yeah, and as many of you know who are on here, my Substack is called I'm Listening. And so I'm always trying to tune in, but we do live in a world that is noisy and
Yeah.
distracting, and it offers many ways to check out from that kind of deep listening. And I know as a mom and as someone who's like constantly multitasking and listening to all different sorts of things, And social media has really intensified that sense of like scrolling to the next thing and not having that deep silence and work. So I do think that is really key. And also, listening for those emotions that are painful, like as a Lutheran, I really
Mm.
appreciate, that sense that the darkness and the pain is what really saves us.
Yeah, well, I think that one thing that wellness industry has done in general, all the practices that I look at, is they have really encouraged the dulling of that, right? And
uh,
often it's a form of spiritual bypassing, right? We do these
yeah,
spiritual practices so we don't have to be angry at the world burning down around us, versus thinking about that rage as productive. Like that rage is telling us
yeah,
something, and how can we metabolize it and use it for good. And so that, I think the connection between listening and emotions, and again, not only leaning into the good or chasing the good, because you're always going to fail. If you're just chasing the good vibes and contentment, life is going to figure out a way to like mess that up for you, right? Something's going to happen. So it's not sustainable anyway, but I also think
mhm.
it's not maybe in our best interest.
No, certainly not collectively. And,
Yeah.
in your work as an ethicist, so let's talk about that piece of it. Like, because I know as someone who's been on the forefront of like studying Christian nationalism for almost a decade now
Yeah.
and understanding the ways in which this current movement of mega and violent masculine religion connects to all of these religious movements in the past of holy wars and the crusades and some very well attuned to the ways in which religion can drive people towards violence and drive people
Yeah.
towards ruling over one another and
Yeah.
cause us to sanction things like slavery and manifest destiny. Um, what are you wanting people to understand about the hope if we can reintegrate some of these wellness practices into some kind of a religious framework? What's the hope for that for us, like broadly, ethically, as a community, as a globe?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that first of what you say, that sort of like the dark underbelly, that is also a part of what I'm trying to like raise to the surface also. So like the fitness chapter starts with the history of muscular Christianity. Like it's important to know that our fitness obsession isn't medical. It comes from a Protestant movement that was about fit male bodies and the nation, and the empire, and and forming certain sorts of male subjects. And I think knowing that is helpful. But then thinking about how can collective movement together do something else? How can it be a form of community building? How can it be a form of remaking ourselves and rethinking our values? I mean, what I mean, in some ways, your question is like, so beyond wellness is my exploration of these different practices. And then the Substack is where I just keep writing about this topic when the book goes off to press and I can't stop myself. And so in some ways, the answer to your question may be better answered from my position of writing the Substack, Religion Reimagined,
Mhm.
because I think I've been thinking, I think I thought I was writing that like Substack for like folks like me who don't have religious affiliation, or my students who call themselves spiritual but not religious. And then I realized that like clergy were quoting me, and or Zen centers were quoting me, because there's a real interest. I think there's a real acknowledgement that like religion has religion has a PR problem for good reasons. Religious institutions are not really, Krista Tippett's line, not fit for purpose. They're not really doing what we need them to do right now. And an interest in reimagining what religion could look like. And for me, a lot of that, so it's interesting, in my Substack, I have a couple of people who are really pushing me on metaphysics. And I'm like, I'm not really interested in talking that much about metaphysics. I'm really interested in thinking about the communal stuff, the engagement stuff, the ethics stuff, because that's just where my heart is. And so for me, it looks like something that might be building different kinds of institutions, or might be more pluralistic. Often I'm finding that there are like religious ideas and concepts that are like kind of buried, but I know from like graduate school or my trainings that like are really, really helpful for figuring out what to do right now. Like, so something like the piece that went the most viral for me ever on Substack, which I can't believe went viral, was really a piece about David Tracy's understanding of analogical imagination, just like Catholic concept. Like, I mean, he was a professor in mine at Chicago. He like never went viral, in this kind of way. I was kind of like crazy that he would go viral on Substack for this. And a piece about Trevor Noah. So there was like a whole pop culture thing. But like the reason it went viral is people are like, yeah, one thing we gave up. I guess I'm interested in like recuperating, like when we left religion. I get why people left religion. I get why people are deconstructing religion, or someone like me who never really felt like I was I didn't never felt like an insider. I get why we are outside, but like, what did we give up when we did that? And that idea of the capacity to imagine a better future is something I feel like I gave up. Like, I think that the thing I'm missing, I don't have higher power for me is a hard concept, really. And so I don't have trust in a higher power the way that my Lutheran mom does, right? Um, I don't have the quite the roadmap. I haven't been trained to imagine. I believe that things are breaking apart. Because I'm an optimist at my heart and I have hope that things are breaking apart because we're going to build something better. But I'm having trouble figuring out what that looks like. And so I'm finding that religious ways of thinking about it are really helping me. So that's kind of, for me right now, it's a dinner conversation. Like, that's how I've been describing it. Like, I'm setting a table. I'm inviting everyone to come. I'm trying out different things. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what religion reimagined looks like. Just like, I mean, for the book, it's beyond wellness. I want something more than wellness. I'm giving you a sense of what that looks like, but it's not a one size fits all. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I do feel like there's movement and there's interest, and the fact that like that my Substack, which is again an extension of the book, found people from such a wide spectrum. And even this book, like people who was worried would see themselves attacked by this book, who are like yoga teachers, right? Or spiritual directors, or tarot card readers, are really interested in this conversation and don't see themselves attacked because they also kind of like want something more. And that to me is like the most hopeful thing. The conversations have been so interesting. I'm not like, I'm not trying to be humble, but like, it's not my writing. The comments on my Substack are really like, people are so engaged. Like, I just like leave something and walk away and, come back 100 comments later. And that to me is, it's not a demographic Pew study forum, like, like numbers of like what's going on, but to me, it is a sign that there's a real interest and a shift and a hunger. And I think I see it a little bit as like, so I am a little itchy about the term spirituality. I associate that with like new age spirituality and a kind of like semi-narcissistic, maybe focus on the individual, very almost selfish. Like, I get really uncomfortable with people calling me spiritual, for example. But what I see when I really like delve into these practices and what people are doing, I see a real sincerity and a real urgency and a real concern for not doing the things that we did like in the 70s and 80s, like exploiting indigenous communities and cultures for like their practices. My students don't want to do that. So there is an ethical concern, but then also an urgency because of what is, waves at the world around us, what is happening right now. And that might be that combination might be, I think that combination is really exciting and very generative. Hopefully.
Well, and I love that metaphor of you setting a table. And I think it's really clear, like, you're setting a table with food that people are very hungry for.
Yeah.
There is this kind of need that's being met. I was thinking about, when I am in that place, even as a pastor, maybe especially as a pastor, of like, okay, I'm feeling pessimistic about the church's ability to overcome its branding. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm feeling pessimistic about like how what I believe at the very depths of my soul can be realized in an actual Christian community here in the world. There's a few places that I turn to. One of them is like yoga. And I think the best yoga teachers are the ones who understand that sense of human connection and who prioritize the unique ways that yoga can help each participant connect. The other two places that I often turn to, one is just that wisdom of the Black church in America.
Yes.
And long
Yeah.
tradition of bearing witness to
Absolutely.
liberation, to a gospel that comes from the margin, a gospel that comes from
Mhm.
those who have been oppressed. And then the other place really is the 12-step movement and
Mm.
folks who are overcoming addiction. And I was thinking about, something that I often hear from folks who are part of that movement is that the opposite of addiction is connection, and that
Hmm.
at its very basic level, religion, spirituality offers us connection with one another, with whatever we can conceive of as higher power.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments about like how movements like 12-step movements intersect, and because they have their own problems too, right?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
like the Christianness of it or the
Yeah.
maleness of it.
Yeah.
But the difference with something like that and like therapy is that it is much more communal and it is much
Yeah.
more accessible.
Yeah. And I think a lot of Beyond Wellness is thinking about how some of these practices have been reduced to their therapeutic sort of benefit for the individual. And I'm like not against therapy. Thank God for
No,
therapy. Just like I'm
totally.
not against like the medicalization of some of thank God for public health, thank God for doctors. But like that to me is like only one piece of what these things can do and only one piece of again that full human life. So yeah, AA has a chapter in my book, which for some people are like, why is AA in your book? Like, it's like yoga and psychedelics and sound baths and
No, it's perfect.
cleansing diets. Why is AA there? And I was like, well, look, AA is there first of all because it's like the OG spiritual but not
Yeah.
religious therapeutic. That's their branding. That's what anybody you ask in the program will insist that AA is not religious. It's spiritual, not religious, and it's open to everybody. And
Mhm.
so, like, for that reason alone, in fact, I think my agent was like, "Oh, don't put that in there. It's like the sacred cow. You're going to make people really mad."
No,
But I also
no.
put it in for very personal reasons. It's a really personal
Mhm,
chapter for me.
mhm.
I mean, this book is really personal, but my father, who's now passed, it was an alcoholic. And
Mhm.
AA was, and he went into rehab, which is something we never talked about, and we did an intervention when he was 70. So that's like when we first said my father is an alcoholic.
Mm,
And he went into, you know, tried to work the program, and for him, he was like, "This is too religious for me. These people are like religious wackadoodles. I don't need this religion.
right.
I've been fine my whole." He's like a dry drunk, meaning that he never presented as drunk. He's like, "These people have real problems. I don't need this."
Sure.
And so like I had to really like so I was like entered this research point being like this thing failed my dad, and it failed my dad because it was too religious, and like
Yeah.
people say it's not religious, and like he like saw it coming up, like, what are you talking about? It's not religious. Like the Oxford group, there's a Protestant, non-denominational, but a Christian group that it comes out of. The 12 steps are steps for
Yeah.
avoiding sin. There's God everywhere. There's higher power everywhere. I mean, it's like
The Lord's Prayer
the
often at the
Lord's
end of the
right, the
meeting. Yeah,
serenity prayer. Like, I mean,
yeah,
this is Protestant theology.
yeah.
And he's just like, I just don't like it. And I know that there are atheist AA chapters or Buddhist AA, but it still felt very religious to him. And so that chapter for me was trying to be like, okay, really, let's take what could be the portable idea here? What could he have gotten out of this program if he could have gotten out of his own way, right? And what can I get out of this program as someone who doesn't suffer from addiction, or at least personally? I
Right.
mean, AA would say I suffer from it from my family, but I don't. I don't drink. I don't do. I'm very, very straight edge. But I still think I can get lessons from this. And that chapter, oh, that was a hard chapter to write through because I went to an Al-Anon meeting for the first time, which is it's like the meetings for family and
Yeah,
friends of alcoholics, and I felt very implicated in that in that meeting and very vulnerable in that
yeah.
meeting. And I worked through the history of AA has all these great stories of, both atheists pushing back and these dramatic mystical and spiritual sort of like experiences or like, ta-da, now I'm sober. And so there's great storytelling in that chapter too. But what that chapter was really for me, and I think the AA, you could tell the story about like, it's really about fellowship, which is kind of how you introduced
Yeah,
it, right? It's really about community, or it's really about
yeah.
witnessing. And that's often how
Yeah.
AA is told.
True.
But the thing that I tried to like really, or the thing that was the hardest for me, because I'm fine with like fellowship and witnessing, But the thing that was hardest for me was the higher power. It was all the God talk. And I know that was hard for my dad. And so that chapter is me working through higher, like, what does it mean to engage and take seriously the idea of a higher power if you don't believe in the higher power? Because
Mhm.
I was just telling the story to someone else. I was invited on, or someone was talking to me about being on their podcast. But there was a litmus test. They wanted to make sure I was a believer first before they invited me on. And I was like,
Hmm.
what do you mean
Wow.
am I a believer? And someone
Wow.
was like, I mean, someone in my life who's Christian is like, they mean, do you believe in God with a capital G? And I was like, oh, well, I don't think I do. So I probably should be on this
Uh-huh.
podcast. I mean, I believe in all kinds of things, but I don't believe in higher power is a hard concept for me. But what I really worked through in that chapter was that I think that AA's central message is not so much the belief in the higher power of God, even though it's everywhere. It's the belief for the addict that you're not God and that you're not in
Yeah.
control. And that is actually a very
Might be more
radical
important.
idea. It's more
Yeah.
important actually than believing in
Yeah.
God in heaven or whatever, or like
Yeah.
actually being able to articulate what a higher power is. It's actually to get before that, you get the idea that you're not the higher power. And that like does all kinds of things. It takes away the burden that you are in control, that you can control. I mean, my dad was very much he can control the situation. He could just, white knuckle his way to sobriety. And I see those tendencies in myself as well. And accepting that you're not God, I mean, it's all kinds of, pushback we can do the tech bros right now, right? Like, what does it mean not to be God? What does it also mean in terms of how you see not only yourself, but like, I mean, I think indigenous worldviews help me a lot here too, where we decenter human life in general. So
Yeah.
actually accepting and understanding for me, the portable idea from AA was that not God, I'm not God. And that is a theological, to me, that's a very religious idea, right? I don't need to have religious identity to believe it though, actually. It's an easier entry point for me. So that's kind of how I head up in that chapter. That's like an example of like, sort of like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to come up with a portable idea that I feel like anybody can like make their own. Um, Knowing full well that I have some people who are reading this book who are coming out of religious trauma and are deconstructing, which is a whole other difficult, baggage to have and relationship to have with religion, as well as people who've just always thought that religion was a problem to eradicate and solve. And I'm trying to meet all those people kind of here in the middle with some other people who are just kind of curious and be like, okay, let's go through the whole like story of AA, and I'll take you on my personal journey. And what if you just got to the end and you were like, I'm not God? That would be huge. Be huge.
I I mean, I'm so glad we've gotten here because truly, you've helped me to understand. And so I have a grandfather who got sober in AA. I have other folks in my family who have, gone through addiction, and it's central for me. Al-Anon is such a important journey for so many folks who have
Yeah.
loved ones who've gone through it.
Yeah.
But I love, this central idea, like, you're not God. For me as a Lutheran pastor, I'd say, like, that's the first use of the law, according to Martin Luther, is each one of us is not God. There's a lot of folks who would benefit from really embracing that idea. Many of them,
Yeah.
yeah, holding a
Eh,
lot of political power in America right now.
Totally, 100%. Or monetary power too, right? I mean, there's
Yes.
all the powers being held by people
Yes.
who think that they're God, like literally. But I think the thing that's I found helpful in that chapter is I always put a little bit of like sprinkle a little religious studies in. So every chapter has a little bit like hidden religious studies theorists because I think they also are helpful. And I think that one is William James, who's very much a religious pragmatist. And for him, it's like, look, you can work out the metaphysics later. Like, and I feel that way a little about God. Like, I think it's enough for me to believe that I'm not God and to not worry about being able to perfectly articulate at this point in my life. I'm only 52. I got time to figure out my metaphysical understanding is. And just to act like I'm not God is enough of a shift in the
Yeah.
way and my orientation to the world. Like you said, it would be amazing if we could just get like that. If there, everybody in Silicon Valley and DC thought that, we would just be a huge sea change.
Well, I think you'd fit right in an ELCA congregation.
Yeah.
But,
When I come to the Twin Cities, I'll come. I want to come.
wonderful. We've got a few for you to choose from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, our time, oh my gosh, it's almost been 50 minutes. It's gone by really fast.
Yeah,
So thank you so much, Liz, for diving into so
of
many
course.
pieces of the breadth and depth of this book and of this moment where we are desperately seeking meaning, truth, connection, and there's so few places to find that. And I love that, it's not just the book, right? It's also you're talking about the community, and that's one of the things, as we both know, Substack is an imperfect platform as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that we can jump on here together, that we can have all these folks, almost 100 people with us being a part of this conversation, I almost said congregation, um, is really a valuable moment. And it makes me hopeful in the sense that all of these connections between us as human beings that have been broken down, that have been cheapened, that have been made like the way that you connect is by paying. We have like
Yeah.
the intensification of clubs and the ways that I see with my kids use sports. Like you are part of this if you can pay for it. There's pay to play. I think the hope coming out of your book and this conversation is that there are still so many sources for real valid connection. And even some of these practices that have been corporatized or taken over by sort of the wellness industrial complex, we can recover some of the meaning
Yeah.
within them.
I think that's right. And one other little fun thing I want to say about Substack is that Substack really connected us because I knew about your work. I had so I run I run a project called Sacred Rights that trains scholars how to be more public, like write more for the public and do more public facing work. And I had an
Which I
intern.
knew of, but I did not know that you ran it. So
That's me.
amazing.
Okay. So I had an intern last summer and I was like, look, we're doing a new project for Christian Century and I want you to go find me some exemplars in this space who are more, Christian faith leaders, less scholars. And she came back with this list and I was like, and you were on that list. So I like knew your work from this summer because she was like totally fangirling you. And then
Yeah.
when you first start Substack, if you're like me, you're neurotic and you check and see how many subscribers you have because you start with I started with, 20 people and you were my number 5,000 or some like number or 10,000 subscriber or something. And I was like, wait a second, I know who that is. And so like, I
Right.
think we actually connected like one-on-one through that. So it's also like kind of fun, like who you can find on this app and you can connect with that way. So
It is because as everyone here knows, this work can be lonely. This world can
yeah,
feel lonely. When you're looking for something beyond that, like good vibes only, everything's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Um, it's really nice. So this won't
yeah.
be our last conversation. We've got some fun things in the works. And I'm praying for, which is ironic given your book, but I'm praying for its reception and the ways that people draw from it and the ways that it continues to resonate in the world.
Great. And do we want to try to look at, I don't even know where the questions are in the chat. Do you want to try to look quickly at things or is it?
I did not see any
Okay.
questions pop up, but
Okay.
if you're here,
Okay.
if you go on to our Substacks, once you get the email of this live video, just hit reply,
Yeah.
and you can get it. I think that'll come to me. But if you have a question for Liz, I'm happy to forward it over to her, and you can also comment on any of her subs. Well, you can hit reply to any of her Substack posts, and it'll go to you as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
you could actually comment on any of my comments are open on all my to non-subscribers and everybody. So it's a wild west on my Substack. So,
amazing.
yeah.
I mean, I had some issues with that long ago, but now that things have calmed down a little, maybe I'll get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. This was fun to do. I knew it would be fun to do. So
Yes. Thanks,
yeah.
everyone. Have a great day.